Twist.io.
Hey folks, Mike Barron here. Talk about what offends us today. Actually, we're going to talk about writing. My partner, Richard Huffman, is an anesthesiologist at a hospital, and he may be on call right now. He may have had an emergency call, and that's not why he's here right now. But I'm hoping he'll join us before the podcast is over. You know, I always wanted to write novels. Ever since I was a little kid, I bought a copy of John D. MacDonald's Deep Blue Goodbye in a cigar store off a spinner rack for 35 cents. I'm standing there on the main street in Mitchell, South Dakota, and I'm looking at this book in my hand, and I had a revelation. I realized, well, he's not writing this for his health. He's doing this to make a living. That's what I want to do. So I set out to become a novelist, and by a trick of fate, wait, here we are. Mark is here. I was talking about how I became a novelist, and I was going to work in to how I had just talked with you about co-writing a novel called Hospital about your experience during the plague years.
That's a story.
Yeah, and before I put you on the spot and ask you to talk about it, I originally conceived this with my best friend, Tom Delaney, with whom I grew up in Mitchell, South Dakota. And Tom is a doctor. He was a doctor at a hospital in Mason City, Iowa. He was an ER physician, and he worked there for many years until the COVID hit. And the administration demanded that he get the vaccine. He refused, and so they fired him. And Tom wrote me about his experiences at the hospital, and they were devastating. And the more he talked about it, the more I realized that this was the stuff of a novel, and that somebody should write a novel about it because of the things that they were forced to endure and go through that went against the Hippocratic Oath, among other things, but also the unfeeling bureaucracy, which did not conform to human needs or emotions, but simply passed on diktats delivered to them from a government by people who've never had any experience in medicine. But here's what Tom, here's some of the stuff he wrote. I work down at the Pine Ridge at the Indian Hospital. Indians are a mixed bag. Some are remarkable, others are destroyed. Much alcohol and subsequent disease. Many do not like white people. Many sad adventures. The Indian children are beautiful, but alcohol destroys many. Drugs and sexual abuse, many before adolescence. Many families are broken. Grandmothers are the matriarchy, respected. Grandmother is an honorific. Frequent hospitalizations from alcohol and its attendant diseases. Mostly when blood alcohol declined to less than 250, they would get up and leave AMA. I think that means...
Against medical advice.
Yeah.
It means you just leave.
Thank you.
Like you just say, forget it, I'm out. Deuces.
You're going to come in a minute. In Chamberlain, my experience was much the same. One Saturday afternoon, the ambulance brought us an obese man, about 300 pounds, drunk as a skunk. He was up on the interstate bridge over the Missouri, fell off, cannonball right next to some guys fishing in a boat. They fished him out and brought him to the ER. His front way more red than his backside, the result of a giant water slap. One Sunday morning, about 10:30, a grandmother brought a 12-year-old girl in complaining of a bad stomach ache. I routinely drew a blood alcohol reading. It came back at 250. This was at 10:30 Sunday morning. When I examined her abdomen, I found a bloody pubic and lower stomach mess. The blood was oozing from between her legs, from enteritis. I called the obstetrician geneticist. He was a locern from California. He had no reservation experience. He could not believe what he found. The poor girl's vagina was torn from introitus to the cervix, through the posterior wall to the rectal vault, what we call a fourth-degree tear. She recalled none of it. She had obviously been raped and sodomized multiple times, perhaps with a broom handle. We flew her to Sioux Falls. Well, I'm going to stop there because the rest is very grim, and I may come back to that. But Mark, do you want to comment on that, or do you want to move on to something else?
That is not a typical medical experience in the North Dallas burbs, I'm happy to say. That's awful.
Well, what did you experience during the plague years?
Well, that's a bit of a story. So I work in the operating room. The 2 or 3 specialties that were most at immediate risk during COVID, well, I think the 2 ended up statistically being the most at risk, were dentists and anesthesiologists, because we're the ones all up in people's mouths, right? We were just, there's no way to avoid it when you're doing dental work or when you're intubating, to avoid proximity to people's airways. So we got the most of the load. When it started looking like it was actually going to be a thing, which I didn't think it was going to be a terribly bad thing, and then it started becoming more of a thing. Then they, when Moderna and Pfizer, et cetera, released these vaccines, this is going to be a ramble, but there's a lot of stuff that went on. They released these vaccines, what they were called vaccines, and my thought was, I don't think they should call them vaccines, because at this point they're so new, so novel. And I saw Fauci getting on there. I have a story. Oh man. Our mutual buddy, Mike Miller, and I have a Fauci project that's never seen the light of day, but I'll show it to you sometime. He was getting on TV and he was saying things that I knew he couldn't possibly know. He was acting like an expert, not just him, there were others too, but you can't be an expert on a novel disease. You can't. It's impossible to be an expert. There was no humility in the presentation of the NHS, and they're still suffering from that. The CDC, the NHS, they're suffering, and I don't know that they will get back to any position of
Respect.
authority or respect or credibility within my lifetime. I don't. I think they burned all those bridges, and everybody, including professionals like me, look at any entity like that, whether or not there's leadership change, the same sort of academic, bureaucratic figures are there. You know what I mean? They're still there, even though the leadership changes. The lifers are still there, and I won't trust them. A couple of particular examples that made me not trust the government. And understand, I'm like a normal guy. I'm like a normal practicing physician. I have the appropriate level of mistrust of all of the American Medical Association, all of the specialty boards, all of the medical boards. They're all very political bodies. None of us really trust them very much. But this took it to the next level. The Surgeon General at the time was Jerome Adams, and he was an anesthesiologist. So he's one of my people. I saw him post on Twitter in response to a question of why he got on early and said, don't worry about masks, it won't do anything, to 6 weeks later saying everyone's got to wear masks all the time. And he responded to that, and he said, well, I wear my mask in the operating room to protect my patients, and so that's why we're wearing masks now. And I read that, and Mike, there's never been one anesthesiologist in the history of medical practice who puts on that mask and says, this is to protect my patient. If you know anything about it, and he did, because by virtue of the fact of being Surgeon General, I know he knows this data. There are many things that have been studied that have been proven to contribute to sterility in the operating room. Obviously, that's a major, major goal. We all wear hats, like the little paper scrub caps, and we all wear masks. Those two, if you look at the tables, the NIH tables have an asterisk because there's not actual data that show that they help. We just do it. We do it because the AORN, the American Organization of Registered Nurses, just thinks that it's a good idea. It just makes sense. But they've studied it. Masks don't do anything for sterility in the OR. Okay? I'll wear a mask to make sure a patient doesn't cough their spit into my mouth, but I've never, ever worn a mask in order to protect the patient. That makes no sense at all. And so when I saw Jerome Adams say that, when I saw him tweet that, I thought, he knows that's not true. He's saying that and it's a lie, and I don't know why he's lying. Then I actually asked him straight up, what made you change? And I don't have a medical account. I don't have, not at all. So I'm just some rando as far as he knows. And he links me to a CDC study, and it was 2 hairdressers who ended up positive for COVID, and they had 100-something clients, and they wore masks. The hairdressers wore masks, and none of the clients tested positive for COVID. So Jerome Adams is like, and here, this study proves it. And I'm like, wait a second. And now maybe that sounds compelling to anyone listening, or even you, but that's an anecdotal study. There's no data that can be derived from that means anything in particular. You may use that to construct a proper study, but to say that is what prompted the government to go so hard on everyone has to wear a mask that there were punitive consequences for not wearing a mask is insane. So Jerome Adams made me not trust the government. Fauci made me not trust the government. The other big what's going on here moment for me was when the American College of OB-GYNs, which is like the governing board for obstetrics and gynecology, right? Lady parts and pregnant ladies. They put out some definitive statement about the quote unquote vaccine, saying unequivocally, this is safe in pregnancy. It had existed for 6 months. 6 months is not a full term pregnancy. You cannot know that it's safe. In fact, most of the drugs that I use as an anesthesiologist are something called Class C, which is unknown safety in pregnancy. The reason that is because you don't do a study with, here's a cohort of pregnant women that won't get any treatment. Here's a cohort of pregnant that will get the treatment. And we're going to see how safe it is by counting how many babies come out hurt or dead. You understand, you can't do that study. So you don't do a study, a prospective study on drug safety on pregnant women. It's unethical. You just don't do it. So I knew that there wasn't a study. I knew that they can't know that it hasn't existed for more than 6 months. That's not a term pregnancy. So again, why are you saying that? What is prompting you to say that? Because I know it's not data. So there was no humility. There was no, we can't know this, we're doing the best we can. There was also the problem of saying this is a vaccine, and knowing that everyone will say, good, then if I take it, I can't get the virus. Well, that proved to not be true. And what happened was exactly what I thought was going to happen, which is everyone would take, well, this vaccine didn't work. And because they called it a vaccine, they'll start doubting all vaccines. And you see that big time now. And I was getting calls from people that I work with saying, can you please talk to my wife? We're pregnant. Now she doesn't trust any vaccine at all. And there are vaccines that really have saved lives. Like, you don't have a summer full of polio at the swimming pool anymore. That's because of a vaccine. But a vaccine has to mean something. And I'm sure most people are aware by now that the definition of vaccine was literally changed to make it fit whatever call it a therapeutic, call it a treatment, and say that it's novel, say that we're doing the best we can. We don't know everything now, but we think it's good. They didn't do that. Then we really got into problems when I saw an attending physician at Massachusetts General, so an academic guy who taught residents, and he was tweeting to the public, I don't think that if someone comes into the emergency room with COVID and they didn't get any sort of vaccine, that we should need to treat them. Okay, that's insane. And not only that, I also heard that that exact sentiment from a surgeon I work with who was chief of surgery at a hospital. So this was very much an NPR far left, because this surgeon was far, far left. But that's not something that we do, Mike. That's not something we do in medicine. And I can give you example after example after example. Doing a pancreatic procedure on a guy who drinks 40 ounces of hard liquor a day. Like, there's no point to that. And that person gave himself the disease. The worst one I ever got was the first case of the day. We did an orthopedic surgery on a little kid who was in a car wreck that killed his mom, dad, older brother, and younger brother. We did that surgery. The third surgery of the day was the gangbanger who T-boned the car, killed the 4 members of the family except this kid who was in a coma, and broke his arm. He was running from a cop because he was firing a gun in public, like in the street, right? So just this absolute scum of the earth. Do you know what we did? We gave him good anesthesia when we fixed his arm. We do the job regardless of patient behavior. And believe me, medicine, at least 75% of medicine, and this is all correlated and quantified, is in America is predicated on the fact that the American patient is a morbidly obese alcoholic chain smoker. Okay? You wouldn't have almost any hospitals filled with people if the American patient didn't give themselves chronic diseases over and over and over again. And we don't care. We don't judge them. We just do the job, knowing that in most cases, it's futile. There's no point in treating a lot of these people because they're only getting a little Band-Aid on it so they can get well enough to go home and do the things that put them in the hospital in the first place. So to hear someone say that, and these people didn't give themselves COVID. These people just declined to take a very suspicious, novel therapeutic. That's a crazy attitude. So what I ended up doing, and you can go on rt.com and feel free to look at my thoughts from 2022. I ended up, and it's a long story how I got there because I didn't mean to, but Russia Today offered to give me a platform to just do op-eds about the American response to COVID. And I'll tell you, I know that sounds weird, and pretty much all the English-speaking contractors stopped a few years ago for obvious reasons. But they let me write whatever I wanted. I hyperlinked a whole chapter of Romans in a piece I did about different people saying, well, there's no religious exemption to this, which is ridiculous. But yeah, I got to do a whole bunch of stuff. Titles like, if you look up R.M. Huffman on RT.com, you can see him. About airline pilots, I'm a doctor and I fear we will never regain the public's trust after COVID. That's true. And they even let me write about Disney Star Wars shows are bad, but at least they're better than the movies. That's true. And then I did one about how bad fantasy is. So they really did let me write whatever I want. That was my COVID experience. And it just destroyed any remnants of faith that I had that the institutional leaders of medicine and public health are honest or humble enough to admit that they don't know everything. And I would strongly encourage everybody to be extremely suspicious of anything that comes out of the CDC, the NIH, or any governing medical board. I'm not saying don't trust them entirely, and there are good people there, but man, that was a wake-up call for me. And I'm not some rando who doesn't know what he's talking about. Like I'm in it. You know what I mean? I'm right there in it. I was exposed to it. It was wild.
I'd like to add a little more about what my friend Tom said about his experience in Iowa. He wrote, In the dark winter nights, the visions I yet see, down the darkened hallways up in the unit, the nurses attending their duty dressed in space suits, their antiviral protective gear, close-fitting helmets with pressurized respirators, gloves, gowns, and double face masks inside the helmets. The sound of the pressurized respirator always with them, each isolated, alone, attending the desperately ill and the dying, alone. I watched and sometimes joined when I could. I was forbidden to do so because of my compromised state, but I would not send them to do that which I would not do. The nurses would object and try to hinder my way, but enter I would after having them suit me up. I am no hero, I am one of them. They bobbled about in the spacesuits, each alone with their fears, the stress of the patients, the unknown. They did not quit. After many months, I began to see the post-traumatic stress syndrome, the psychological and physical fatigue. Yet they stayed. I told you about the young nurse, her appearance as above, extremely smart, kind, the one you want with you when the shit hits the fan. Repeated the story of the English king and the band of brothers. I told her she and the others were truly the band of brothers, and I was ever proud and humbled to be part of that. She stared at me and began to cry. There's another, truly a God-given save, a 41-year-old deputy sheriff presented with C-19, rapidly progressive respiratory failure, low oxygen, high carbon dioxide level, rapid shallow breathing. Very soon on to the ventilator. Confounding medical issues of chronic lymphocytic leukemia, poor immune status. As the disease progressed, he developed diffuse organ system failure, anemia, leukopenia, and thrombocytopenia. We worked to keep him alive. He died 4 times. After much work in 3 months, he survived, regaining some strength, able to walk a bit with a walker and assistance. When time for him to transfer out, I had the nurses walk him down the hall to the elevator. The hallway was lined with staff, doctors, residents, and others. Much applause. Tears too. His smile was ear to ear. When Tom wrote these things, he said, this is the stuff of a novel. A novel about a physician who comes to work at a hospital. Maybe it's his first job. And he's there for about a year, and it's an ordinary hospital experience, which is extraordinary for most people who've never lived or worked in a hospital. But then when COVID struck, everything changed. And a lot of it didn't make any sense. In fact, a lot of it was harmful. And the more he talked about it, I said, Tom, we should write a novel about this. But Tom's a very private person, and he still suffers trauma from his memories of the hospital, and he was unable to do that. So I broached it to Huff here, and Huff likes the idea because Huff wants to write. And so that's something we're going to work on in the future, is a novel about what happened at the hospital during the plague years, and it will be called Hospital.
There's much to discuss.
Well, we can change topics now that we've bummed everybody out.
Man, yours was worse than mine. Mine was just, the res.
Tom is very eloquent. I could read you more, but it was very difficult for him. But he's out now. He's my oldest friend. He's a lifelong biker like I am. I had to sell my last motorcycle about 6 months ago because of weakness, and because I had this compressed nerve at the base of my spine, which I just had operated on. I'm recovering from that now. I'm doing fine. I'm walking. They say you got to walk a lot, and I'm walking a lot. But they said you can't lift more than 10 pounds. Well, every year that motorcycle became heavier and heavier. I bought it in 1998. It was a Honda Shadow 750 for aficionados. And I miss it every day. I wish that I could ride again. I probably could ride a smaller bike, but my wife had been on me to sell that bike for years, and I don't think she'd put up with me getting another bike. and seeing what goes on around town. There have been a number of serious accidents. I'm fine with that. But I rode a motorcycle for more than 50 years, and there's no greater pleasure than riding a bike through beautiful countryside. And most of it was in Wisconsin. We have what we call the driftless area, which is the southeast or the southwest quarter of the state. The glaciers came down and stopped halfway down, then they melted. And as they melted, they carved hundreds of little valleys with their rivulets throughout the wooded hills. And later on, all those valleys became roads, and the roads are all paved because Wisconsin is a dairy state and the milk has to get to market. So you could ride all day through beautiful countryside, hardly see another person, and never ride on the same road twice. And when people say, well, why do you ride? A lot of people ride for the brotherhood, but the sheer pleasure of riding is what did it for me. And I still get some of that pleasure on a bicycle, although it's different. And now I have an electric bike, and I'm not giving that up because where I live has miles and miles of dedicated bicycle trails. And by that, I mean, they're not on public roads at all. They're limited to bicycles and pedestrians. And I can ride, I have a 30-mile loop I ride from my house that cuts across prairie dog villages, through prairies, through the hearts of neighborhoods, usually behind the houses, because Fort Collins is riven with creeks everywhere, and everywhere there's a creek they can't build. So those creeks run through neighborhoods, and they create countless cul-de-sacs and countless vast areas between houses that are natural areas, and that's where they put the bike trails. Huff, do you ride a bike?
Oh, we used to ride bikes to med school, and when we moved up to the burbs, there's just no good place to do it.
Well, you're in
It's
Texas.
just street riding. We could build however we want to. There's so much land here, and how they've decided to build is giant toll roads and highways connecting vast city-sized neighborhoods of giant stick frame houses, and you gotta go from the neighborhoods through the toll roads to whichever Whole Foods or Target shopping center is closest to you.
Well,
And
that's a shame.
And I hate it. There are good things about working here, but we built, not me, I had nothing to do with it, but it's not particularly pretty anyway, but it is just a sea of concrete. A very affluent sea of concrete.
Right.
But just in 50 years, I don't think it's going to be anything that anyone wants to be a part of, because all the stuff is going to fall down.
I live in a very crunchy granola town, so bike trails are a priority, as they are in Madison, Wisconsin. The trails are many and beautiful.
There's a big biking community, but they all just use the roads. So they're up here. They're largely hated.
I can sympathize. But being a bike rider myself, I always give them the benefit of the doubt. But I've never run into a group of naked bike riders who were deliberately riding to obstruct traffic, as we have seen recently in Portland.
Portland's next level.
Yeah, I'm sure they got a lot of nice bike trails too, because that's a crunchy granola town. And I've been out there several times.
That's too crunchy. Fort Collins is a little crunchy. Yeah, that's too crunchy.
We're very crunchy. I haven't been there recently. What's
this?
Pops put this up.
Yeah, Pops put this up.
It's a new illustration from Dungeons and Dragons. If you can blow that up a little more, Pops.
Yeah, zoom in there, Pops.
And I'll tell you why he put it up. It's because of the two figures in the center.
Oh, it's all of it. There's a lot going on here.
Yeah.
So this is a tweet, an official Dungeons and Dragons piece of art from the official Dungeons and Dragons account. Can you zoom in there? Maybe if you pull, yeah, oh, close.
Working. He's looking. He can do it better than we can. Well,
Well,
anyhow,
it's pretty popular,
yeah,
but you see two fellas there dancing a little
closely.
a little mm, over there in the shadows on the right. You can see the two old ladies, obviously a couple. Silver Dragon over there, the right in the distance. You see a looks like a D&D fantasy drag queen. Couple of girls flirting in the background. Silver Dragon just flying under a rainbow. The non-binary pink-haired gnome bard rocking on a stringless ukulele. So I got thoughts about this, and a lot of people do too, because this is currently it's blown up pretty good with a lot of comments. The first thing, content aside, Mike, you and I have spent a lot of time around artists. I have actually done concept art. Before I started writing, I drew, and I did miniature design concept art. I never did color. I just did pencil art. But I've done concept art for Wizards of the Coast. I used to just browse Wizards of the Coast, just all of their websites, because the art was so good. It just inspiring. I mean, Todd Lockwood, who's old school, and I don't know how busy he is now, but we corresponded, and he actually, when I was a med student, he offered to take me on as his apprentice, which I was busy at the time, but that was flattering. Wayne Reynolds was doing art. Jeremy Jarvis was doing art. A lot of them shared work with Magic the Gathering, which I also got into because a guy who did my book covers is a guy named Lucas Graciano, who did a bunch of Magic cards, but they all switch back and forth, and those are both Wizards companies. The point is, the art was amazing. It was so good. Jeremy Jarvis did watercolors. Wayne Reynolds did acrylic. Some of the guys did digital, but they're all classically trained. This is garbage. Content aside, this is terrible. This is worse than fan art. This looks like it's not finished. None of this is finished. Every single aspect of it looks like it's a sketch by a not terribly talented artist. Because I mean, I've art directed from sketch to finish oil painting before. So this is a sketch that you would send a client, kind of giving them the color schemes, and it's just, for this to be released by Wizards of the Coast with the artistic pedigree that company has, is just mind blowing to me. The content is terrible too. This is not fun. This is not an adventure. There is not a single person who's played D&D before 5 years ago who would look at this and say, well, this looks like a fun campaign. This is ridiculous. Which brings me to a broader point that a lot of people are discussing too, is there one single, real question, Mike, is there one single former nerd geek property that was just a citadel of nerddom that nobody else would come near because it was geek lands only, that hasn't been infected and taken over by woke, rainbow flag waving feminists who hollowed out all the meat from it and is just wearing it as a flaming mincing rainbow skin suit? And I'm going down the list, and I don't know that there is. Dungeons and Dragons, no, obviously. Magic the Gathering, that probably started 3 or 4 years ago, but take my word for it, also the same thing as that. So all Wizards of the Coast. DC Comics, nope. Marvel Comics, nope. The MCU, no. DC film is just a mess.
Pops, put that up that I just posted at the bottom of this. There you go.
Yes. So that's DC Comics. That's Superboy.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to see that. They did the same thing with Tim Drake. They did the same thing with Iceman. Like I got a miniseries of Iceman. He's with his kid's mom. Like the whole thing is about how he has a kid with a Japanese girl. Like what? So they're just retconning everybody. Harry Potter, what as people say that J.K. Rowling is based, and I like her. She drew her line in the sand, and she's standing firm that boys can't be girls. I don't know how many points you get for that. Like I realize in this retard time, that's like super based, but she trained the dogs that are snipping at her heels and trying to eat her alive by saying Dumbledore is gay. Like that was the first real instance of a fandom, the feminist woke rainbow fandom, realizing that they had enough power, a big enough voice to coerce creators to change their properties to satisfy this far left ideology.
Wasn't Dumbledore always gay?
No, there was no indication of Dumbledore being anything because that wasn't the character. Nobody cared. He was just an old guy. There's no indication that he was at all. But because he was just a blank, they insisted, well, you should make Dumbledore gay. And J.K. Rowling said, okay. And now you have Black Snape, and there's a rumor that Tilda Swinton will be Voldemort, who's a boy.
Yes, I don't mind a gay character if they rise organically out of the story.
No, that wasn't at all what happened. She got strong-armed, and then they said, hey, now you on board with the trans stuff? And at first she was like, well, I mean, I'll treat him with respect, but they pushed too hard. And so now she's base, but she's not base. In fact, she's like probably patient zero for this whole problem. And again, I like her, but she is super liberal. She just doesn't accept that boys can be girls.
She draws the line at something that's frankly unbelievable.
Yes, exactly. But what is there? Star Wars? No, that's woke. Star Trek? Super woke. Doctor Who? Super, super woke. What is there? What do we have left?
Okay, I'm glad you asked that because people want to know what to watch. Michael Connelly's a crime writer in Los Angeles, a great crime writer. I enjoy his books, and he created a detective named Bosch. And there's a six seasons. 6 seasons of Bosch are now available on Amazon Prime. It stars Titus Welliver, who is Bosch. It's the best police procedural I've ever seen. Every season is brilliant because every season is based on one of Connelly's novels, and he's a great writer. And when you base a season of a TV show on a really good novel, you got gold, baby. And he also created another character called the Lincoln Lawyer. And the Lincoln Lawyer has 2 seasons in the bag on Netflix. And the Lincoln Lawyer is a friend of Bosch too. In fact, they're half brothers. And Bosch is going to be appearing in the new Lincoln Lawyer season. I recommend both those series wholeheartedly. Everything about them is great. You believe all the nuts and bolts of the story are true. Police techniques are absolutely authentic. You don't doubt any of it. It's not being made up by people who don't know what they're talking about. It's being made up by somebody who was a police reporter for many years and interacts with the police and researches his stuff very well. That's one. Another show on Prime is called Unbound, and it's the story of Ferdinand Magellan's circumnavigation of the globe, which happened in the 15th century. Is absolutely believable. It grabs you by the throat from the beginning and never lets go. The acting is superb. The cinematography is superb. You are there. You can't believe he did it, and it looks real. I was sorry when it ended after 6 episodes, but that's all they needed to tell his story. Those are a couple of shows that I found outstanding and I recommend.
Excellent.
Huff, you probably don't have enough time to watch TV like I do to come up with good stuff.
No, it's irritating. My current read is, well, and this is pretty woke too, but I'm reading the first 3 books in Anne Rice's Interview with
Vampire
the
List.
Vampire. I'm on vampirelist now, Queen of the Damned, and I'll be stopping there because I know enough about that's woke. But honestly, that was designed woke. But I started it, and it's a nice little 3-book hardcover volume, so I got to finish it. I am starting after that. I got a Chesterton book that I'm gonna read. But Elric of
Milnebone.
yeah, I didn't know how to say that, but thank you. So that's what I'm starting next.
I
And I'm.
adapted those novels into graphic novels.
Did you really?
Yes, I'll send you one.
Oh yes, I would love that. So yeah, um, and it's out there. Like I haven't read it. Um, I can't wait because it's old, and I trust old things more. It's not even that old, but I trust the old things more.
Well, he was a great fantasist, and there's a reason for that because of the way he wrote.
Yeah. Um, that's all I got on my plate.
Well,
I got other projects, but I guess one day I feel like we're in this weird space where no one is really creating big cultural iconic projects at the moment. Sorry,
they
James
could be.
Cameron. They
They,
could be. No one's paying for it. I know James Cameron wants Avatar to be a thing, but Avatar is not going to be a thing, man. Um, I'm glad you're making lots of money, but nobody cares about Avatar, which is a strange phenomenon because it makes tons of money. But there's going to come a day where we are going to see a renaissance of intellectual properties in fantasy, in sword and sorcery, in sci-fi, action, adventure, all of these things, because Hollywood will finally have cannibalized all of the properties from the 70s and 80s down to the bone. There's nothing left. We're creating new things.
well, alternatives are popping up all over, like Angel Studios, which is having a theatrical
Mm-hmm.
release, I believe, this weekend. And of course, you know that Mel Gibson and
Mm-hmm.
uh, geez,
Marky Mark.
yeah, Mark Wahlberg and uh, and Denzel Washington have formed a production company together, and they moved out of Hollywood. I think they're basing it in Georgia to make pure entertainment. Entertainment. It's superfluous to say unwoke entertainment because pure entertainment is unwoke. Woke implies an agenda. It implies a message and implies a chip on the shoulder. And the reason that people no longer read Marvel and DC comics is they forgot their number one obligation, which is to entertain. People read a book to forget their troubles, to lose themselves in an exciting adventure, to find a character that they love, and find everything he does fascinating. And the greatest example of that is Sherlock Holmes, who's probably the most popular fictional character in history. He's known in virtually every country in the world, and people are pumping out Sherlock Holmes novels and pastiches and and uh, uh, and movies to this day. I was just look at Robert Downey Jr. He's working on a third Sherlock Holmes movies. If you look up Sherlock Holmes movies, you'll see more than you can watch in a lifetime,
Mm-hmm.
and most of them are pretty good. Um,
Yeah. Uh, when we start making, and I agree, if someone hasn't read Sherlock Holmes, that's another one that you should. There's a reason that character is so popular, and it's because the stories are great. So get a cheap copy. It's just a bunch of short stories in 4 novellas. You should read them. Um, I think the lesson that we have to take from this, um, we being any of the creatives who end up being involved in the next wave of Star Wars, Star Trek, Aliens, Predator, Lord of the Rings, whatever, they're going to be, it's going to be someone. But when you do that, you have to gatekeep. You have to gatekeep and be mean about it. And it's cyclical. It's a lesson that we keep having to relearn over and over and over again. And it's true for governments. It's true for colleges. It's true for any organization. But in particular, gatekeep your nerd fandoms. Gatekeep them. Keep people out. If they
What
if,
we
if
want
they
as wide an audience as possible.
yes. So
What you mean is you don't want people in there with an agenda.
that's exactly what I mean. You want to broaden it. You want it to be because here's the thing. Now Star Wars has gone from something that everybody can like to something that all the old fans are sick of and that no one can like. DC Comics went from something that had broad appeal to something that everybody cringes at. And that's what I mean. You want to, when you have something that is proven to be broadly popular, you have to keep it that thing. And don't let anybody come in and say, well, you know what? I think I'm a fan. I've never shown any proof of being a fan, but I'm also a girl, or I also have X, Y, and Z, and you really need to represent me. So let me in. And then they get in and they just ruin it. And it's happened over and over and over again. So just be careful. Anyway, I like to like stuff, and right now I don't like anything. So that's why I'm whining about it so much.
Well, Ray Donovan was a show, I think was on HBO,
Mm-hmm.
which is superb. It starred Liev Schreiber as a problem fixer from Boston in Los Angeles. And by a problem fixer, I mean if a star woke up with a dead hooker in his bed, he'd call Ray Donovan to take care of it. And Donovan had a little crew with him. And one of the crew was a woman who was a private investigator who worked for him. And she was brilliant, just a brilliantly written character. And she was gay, but it was incidental to the plot. And it just came out when she attended to her private life. And you learn that in the course of the story. It was no big deal. I think Ray Donovan lasted for 6 seasons, and then they made a
Yeah.
movie out of it. And
Did
I
they?
can't.
I
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
realize
There's a
they made
Ray
a movie.
Donovan movie. You should Google it. It's terrific. I can't recommend it too highly. Of course, Ray Donovan also played that guy that Palooka who fought Muhammad Ali. I can't think of his name. Yeah, I'll find it right now. And it's an interesting movie. It's not a traditional uh, boxing movie. It was called Chuck Wepner from Bayonne, New Jersey. They called him the Bayonne Bleeder because he'd get beat up a lot in the ring and he'd bleed all over the ring. And for some reason, Ali decided to give him a shot. And of course, it was rough on Chuck Wepner. He did not win that fight. But the movie's not a typical boxing movie at all. It's about Chuck's ups and downs in life, trying to find himself and taking any gig he could get. And he wanted to be a boxer, but he couldn't rely on that because he wasn't a very good boxer. And when this opportunity came along, it elevated him for a moment into the national spotlight, and it changed his life in ways he didn't expect, in ways the reader didn't expect.
Hmm.
And we could talk about boxing movies till the cows come home because there are so many of them. But that's an unusual one. Most boxing movies follow the same pattern. Boxer starts at the top. He gets knocked out. He loses. He becomes depressed. He goes on drugs. He goes on alcohol. And then he decides he's got to seek redemption. He's got to fight his way out of that bag. And so he works and he gets a new trainer and they train. He gets a shot and he wins that fight and finally gets a shot at the title and he triumphs. And the best example of this is Southpaw.
Oh yeah, that Jake Gyllenhaal.
Jake Gyllenhaal. It's a brilliant movie. And the director is one of my favorite directors. Because he does the Equalizer movies, who's brilliant. And what is his name? What is the director's name? Antoine Fuqua. Antoine Fuqua, one of my favorite directors. And if you've never seen the Equalizer movies, they are the greatest Punisher movies ever made.
I have seen all 3 of the Equalizer movies.
Yeah. So
I like it because Pedro Pascal gets his.
Which movie is he in?
He's in the second one.
Oh, I'll have to watch it again.
Yeah, it's good because he gets his. Anytime Pedro Pascal gets his eyes gouged out, I'm a happy viewer.
The third one is as good as the first because they changed the scene and the theme so dramatically that it's not like Rocky after Rocky after Rocky, which are all boxing movies and follow the necessary boxing movie parameters. The Equalizer surprises the hell out of you in the third installment, and it's as good as the first. And the first is the greatest vigilante movie ever made, in my opinion.
That they were all really good, and I watched them back to back to back. And yeah, they all had their own particular flavor. It wasn't just a copy paste at all. So there's something else good.
Yeah. All right, we've bored these people enough.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah. What do you think? How should we call it a day?
Yeah, we'll call it a day.
All right. Thanks for watching, folks. Tune in this time next week, and we'll talk more about popular culture.
All right. See you later.
Bye.
We got to come up with a sign out sometime, but we'll think about it.
Yeah.
We'll workshop it.
We'll work it.
Yeah, we'll work on it. All right. See you later. Bye.
The live viewing of any Madness Entertainment Group production, you can find all our content on Roku or as a member of this channel. We'll see you next time on the Madness Entertainment.